We're in a time where our country is more diverse than ever and more divided than ever.
What is the gospel? This isn't just good news for us, it's good news for the world.
And so when we care for the world, we care for issues that impact the world.
When we study the Gospels, we learn about Jesus' favorite themes. And clearly his favorite theme was God.
The only way you really discover the good stuff of the kingdom is when we let God break apart our mediocre assumptions.
For too long, we've preached a cross that is too small.
We want the Word of God to be proclaimed in a way that people can listen and be changed for His glory and the building of His kingdom.
Welcome to this Seminary Now live event. Seminary Now is a streaming videos platform delivering exclusive theological and ministry courses from a diverse group of professors and authors. I'm Jeremy Eccles, the incoming president and publisher of InterVarsity Press, and it's a pleasure to introduce our teacher of the evening, Dr. Esau McCaulley, whose Seminary Now course is based on his InterVarsity book, Reading While Black, the winner of Christianity Today Book of the Year Award. This live event is brought to you by Seminary Now and InterVarsity Press. Esau is Associate Professor of New Testament at Wheaton College and is contributing as a contributing writer of the New York Times. As mentioned earlier, he is a published author with numerous books on the horizon. And in addition to his duties, hopefully with InterVarsity Press, and in addition to his duties with the New York Times, he is a frequent contributor of outlets like Christianity Today and the Washington Post. Welcome, Esau.
Thank you, but you gave me a promotion. I'm not an assistant professor. I'm an assistant, not an associate. So
okay, sorry, assistant professor.
Assistant professor, yeah.
All right.
You know, I got some books coming out with y'all. You know which one is next?
No, which one? Aren't you writing? You're writing a children's book, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Josie Johnson's Hair and the Holy Spirit. That's coming out.
Yes, I'm excited about that. Yeah. I'm loving that.
Anyways.
Yes. Let me introduce the course. As we've already mentioned, the Seminary Now course is based on Esau's award-winning book, Reading While Black, published by InterVarsity Press. So let's get started. Let's watch this 2-minute video trailer.
If you go back to the very beginning of the people of God in the Old Testament, all the way back to Genesis, you see that the people of African descent are not extras. They're part of God's story. And then if we turn our eyes to the beginning of the Christian story, you see Africans who are being drawn to the living God. Therefore, the person of African descent who becomes a Christian today is not entering some strange new land. We're finding our way home. The Bible read as a whole creates a disposition towards freedom. And when my ancestors looked in that text and found a God who willed their freedom, they were reading the text rightly. And to those who saw in that same Bible the justification of our ongoing oppression were poor interpreters of the biblical text. And so African Americans who feel this deep sense of rage and frustration about the way that the world has treated them finds a friend and a neighbor in the God of Israel and discovers a Bible that includes that same frustration. What are the unique gifts the African American Christian tradition has to offer to the wider body of Christ? And how does the distinctive African American habits, ethos, and culture as it relates to the practice of Bible reading help us address pressing issues like policing and public protest and ethnic identity? Please join me in this class as we explore these important questions and so many more.
Welcome back. I'm excited about that course. I think I'm going to have to join it as well. So
it was funny. That was during the beard era. I thought it was a good at the time. Like,
I know, I'm like going, I was looking at it, I was like, is that
I was
him?
like,
It's like, look at his beard.
one of the things, never decide to like grow a beard for the first time in your life and then record a video series. That's all I think about when I see the commercial. I hate the beard. I should listen to my wife. This is the other thing. Listen to your wife. If you're married, listen to your wife. She said, cut the beard, cut it.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, exactly. That's what I tell my husband all the time. Listen to your wife. All right, let's jump into the questions. We'll jump into a few questions and
Okay.
then we'll see what comes up as well. But I have a few questions as well. So let's start with the inspiration of the book. What's behind the inspiration of the book? That's also the foundation of the course at seminary now. Tell me a little bit about that. What brought that
Man.
idea about?
There was a lot of stuff going on in my life when I first started to write the book. Interestingly enough, I just wrote about this in the last article that I wrote for the New York Times, where part of it was, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Part of it was my father died right before, right around the time I was thinking of negotiating the contract and those things for what
Sorry to
became
hear
Reaching My
that.
Black. But it was, I mean, it was a tragedy, but death has its own way of clarifying things.
Yes.
And so it gave me, it was his death. And to be honest, even though they were separate conceptually, I started thinking about what became Reading While Black during kind of the late 15, what became 2016, leading into the first Trump presidential election cycle. And there were so many Black and brown people who were getting abused and mistreated by the police. And I remember a lot of people were in the streets and they were protesting and they were saying things like, this isn't your grandparents' civil rights movement. We're going to do something a little bit differently. And I understood the frustration because Christianity can sometimes feel anemic to the pressing issues of the day. But I was like, well, hold on. I was raised in a Black church tradition that spoke directly to these issues. And so I wanted to write a book that would encourage, in particular, Black Christians to remain a part of the tradition that had shaped us and formed us into who we became as a people. And so the deaths of those people during that period of time, mixed with my father's death, kind of coalesced to give me a freedom to write something. It's always easy to write when you don't have a platform. So nobody was checking for Reading While Black. And so it's really funny when people ask you, like, what did you think when you were writing it? As if I knew all of y'all was going to read it.
Yes.
I just wrote it because it was like, this is something I got to say. And if nobody wants to listen to it, then I said it. And so there was a feeling of rebellion. There's one of the people who work at IVP, her name's Anna Gissing, and she was my editor. And I remember saying to her quite a few times during the writing process, I don't know if people are going to like it, but there's nothing like it. As far as what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. And so really it was the deaths of Black people that inspired me, and the need to speak a word of hope to, in particular, I had in mind like a 25-year-old Black Christian was wondering whether or not the scriptures in the church had something to say to the deep sense of dis-ease that they felt.
Well, I agree with you. I think as I was looking through the book and I was thinking about some of the things that you talked about and some of the things that you say you glean are some of the limitations and contrast of, for our carefreeness of our, of our white counterparts. It's like when I think about our Black children and the struggles that they have, this is something that you actually give credence to. And just the fact that they have, in some ways, they've lost their childhood, they've lost their humanity. So how do you really truly reach out to them to help them feel as if they belong in a society where it feels like they may not?
One of the things that you do is you don't lie to them. One of the ways that I feel like that the church tries to solve the problem is by convincing people that the problem isn't that bad. And if I see there's one thing that happens, especially among my white brothers and sisters, not all, but some, is that like when we come with these problems, it's always an isolated incident, or it's always we're being overly dramatic, or there's always the alternative explanation. instead of the explanation that is on the lips of so many Black and brown people in America, which is namely there's parts of this country and the way that we do things that are fundamentally broken. And so the first thing that you can do is lie to young people. They know what's going on. The internet and the world exist. And so what I try to say to people, it is precisely into the world that they experience that you speak words of hope. And so I try to earn the right to speak to them by telling them the truth. So that's the first thing I did. I told them the truth. The second thing I did is I tried to look back and to say, this isn't the first time we've been in this place before.
Right.
This feeling where there was no way to go. Where, you know, Pharaoh is coming this way and the Red Sea is that way. And
Yes.
in a hard place. And now this revolution don't seem like the best idea. And it's in that moment that you have to learn how to trust God. And what I tried to say is, and this is important, because people, it's funny, Jeremy, you make arguments in books that people don't know because they just want to ask you about the fancy stuff. But let me give you some free game that like nobody, but you the president, so I got to treat you, I got to president, I got to give you some free game. So there was a reason that I turned to Black history and Black Christian history in particular, because their testimony matters. And so we look back and we say, I've heard so many people say, what has God ever done for Black people? And then I said, why don't we ask what Black people were saying at the time? So you go back to the Civil War, and the people, Black Christians in the Civil War said, well, God set us free. They didn't give Abraham Lincoln the credit. They said, that was Jesus.
That's right. That's right.
The people who were there at the time said, it is God who is acting on our behalf to give us freedom. If you go back to the Civil Rights Movement, these were Christians, not all of them, but significant numbers of them were Christians who said it is God who's on our side to tear down Jim Crow. So what we're not allowed to do then is go back and secularize that entire history and then say there's no evidence of God's life worked on the lives of Black people, where Black people at the time were saying, look at God. And so then I say, well, then the same God who did those things in the past can do it again today. Now, sorry, this is like deep, I mean, not deep, level of Bible number 3. Why did I argue in that way? Because it's a biblical way of arguing. When the people of Israel found themselves in exile, they had kicked out of Jerusalem or Israel and sent off into exile. When they say, well, what is the basis of my hope? You read the prophets and they would say, the same God who brought us out of Egypt will bring us out again. So in other words, God's past activities functioned as revelation of his character that gave people in the present an opportunity to begin to hope again. And so I was saying then, given where we are as a people in America, well, what evidence do we have that God might be working on our behalf? Well, then, if you look back to the testimony of our ancestors, then they said God did it. So I want to say he can do it again. That's his character. And the last thing that I did, so I told them the truth, turned to the history of our people, and then I turned to the biblical text itself. That the frustration and disappointment that you have with the brokenness of the world is revealed in the scriptures themselves. It's the fact that God sent his son because he thought that we were really, really jacked up as a world. You know, the incarnation means that this, I mean, it's really serious when the son got to come down and take care of stuff. And so God's analysis of the human condition is that we're in real deep trouble. And so when you look at this and say, this is a problem, I would say it's almost a problem that's significant enough to have the second person of the Trinity come amongst us and redeem it from within. And so I wanted to say then, I told them the truth. I told them about our history. And I told them about a God who was there with them, fighting alongside them for the things that they hold dear.
So as a part of that, it's like you talk about hope a lot, and that's kind of the foundation of the book. So how do we find how do I find the hope that exists in a country where it feels that a lot of times there is no hope, especially now and today, where how do I find that in a way that actually really speaks to my soul?
I mean, I don't think we find hope. I think hope finds us. That's what it means. I mean, yesterday, I mean, I don't know who's listening to this, but one of the clergy in our denomination passed away. A good friend of mine named Thomas McKenzie. And he was always someone who, whenever I was down, I would look to see some of the ministry that he was doing where he was, and it gave me a sense of hope. And so there's a basic sense in which sometimes you look to human beings and other institutions as signs of hope. Some people even like look to authors really like as signs of hope. But here's the problem: we're finite, and we fail, all of us. And
Absolutely.
so, like, my book isn't the hope of the world. I'm not the hope of the world. I mean, you as the new president, you might be the hope of university. That's another conversation for another day. But for me, hope is really rooted in the resurrection. It's not in like the ups and downs of the American or the lefts and rights of the American political, spectrum. It's rooted in this idea that our great enemies, sin and death, were defeated by Jesus Christ. And Paul says that the same power that was in work in raising Jesus Christ from the dead is at work in the church. And so my hope isn't that in something that I see in America. It's the fact that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. And if Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, then the things that he says about the world are true. And his way of being in the world is true. And so that means that doesn't mean that I escape the world. That means that I can engage the world confident in God's victory. Because if I'm looking at like the confidence in my victory, I don't know. I think that me and you are the same age, right, Tammy?
In my perfect world, yes.
But what I would say is this: when I was, and people say this at 41, that I'm still a baby. But I remember being in my 20s and maybe even my 30s, thinking that we could win. In the sense that, like, here are these 3 or 4 problems that exist in the world, and you will address them, and then they'll be fixed.
Okay.
And then you realize how persistent those problems are, and that many lives have been wrecked against against this immovable mountain. And I realized that, like, I may not be able to tear the mountain down. We may not be able to tear the mountain down in our day. But we can knock off a couple of those layers. We can shake it a little bit. And if you keep shaking it, they fall. And so my job now isn't to win in the sense of eliminating racism in America. My job is to bear witness to a king and a kingdom. And I think that witness, because of what I believe about Jesus, isn't in vain. And so the one I think about, it was, oh my goodness, going to get the details wrong. Is it Plessy versus Ferguson? Is the one in 1860? It's one of the one, whichever one. It's it's too late at night for me, but my things are mixed up. But it's the one that happened in around 1860, where it said that the states were not, the fugitive slave laws could be enforced nationally, which basically meant there's a court decision, maybe in Dred Scott. It was a court decision that said no matter where a slave escaped legally, they can be brought back to their master. And one of the lines that I remember is like the Negro has no rights to which the white man is required to respect, and that was stated by the Supreme Court. And that was the highest law in the land. And there was no future for the abolitionist movement that you could see. We went all the way to the Supreme Court and we lost. And there was no visible way that you could see. The Supreme Court said game over. Within a decade, the Civil War would have taken place and leading to ultimately the abolition of slavery. Now, a lot of stuff is going to happen after the 13th Amendment. We're not done. But what I'm saying is, Frederick Douglass and the abolitionist movement at that moment couldn't have seen a logical reason to hope.
Right.
But they kept going because there's the truth of the thing that matters. And so I guess what I want to say is that the reason that I have hope is because I believe that God's on the side of truth. And if God's on the side of truth, even if I don't live to see it, I believe the truth will win out.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. I do have a couple of questions that I want to throw your way from our Facebook friends and somebody on Seminary Now. It says, We have somebody that's preparing to lead a group on reading while black, which I think is pretty amazing. It says said, "What would you hope that they would take away from your book?" Is there anything where you would say, "Don't miss this"?
One of the things that nobody ever asked me about in the book, or I rarely get asked about, is the first part in the first chapter. Y'all gonna get me in trouble because you slide things into the book. You want people to see, and you're like, "Oh, I'm cooking right here," but they don't know it, and maybe I can get by.
Uh-huh.
I think that the section on rooting for everybody black, it's only like 2 pages in the first chapter. It gets at a dynamic around how black Christians talk about Christianity amongst each other, and how our voices are weaponized by different ends of the white Christian spectrum, that I think is very, very important. And so I would actually say like the first chapter is really important. So I would say don't miss the first chapter. And I would say, you know how like they have in the Chronicles of Narnia, there's the proper order. The proper order for reading the book is to read chapter 1, then read the appendix or the bonus track, and then start the book. So I would recommend that you do that. And let's see what else I would say. Oh, my favorite part of the book that no one ever asked me about, because maybe I didn't write as well as I thought I did. My favorite part of the book is actually the discussion of the analogy between John the Baptist and the Black church in the chapter on Reading While Black. That to me, I was like, sorry, no one cares about the writing process. That part to me was very, very important. So look at Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John the Baptist in the chapter. I think the chapter on Reading While Black. I think that's the name of it. That chapter, but it opens up with an extended discussion of the Gospel of Luke. That's probably my favorite portion of the book. Sorry, I'll do like all kinds of random little tidbits. Here's the other thing too. The other thing that's funny. The chapter on Black rage. I did something I criticize my students for doing all of the time. I call them footnote deserts. That means when you just go long periods of time without interacting with anybody else instead of showing your work. But when I wrote that chapter, I remember thinking, man, I got some stuff I just need to get off my chest. And so I'm not citing anybody other than like the bare minimum. So I just sat down and wrote that chapter in like a day or two. And I just sat down and just wrote it. And there's just large portions of it where I'm just working through these biblical texts. And maybe I went back later and footnoted it, but this is just like me. And so it's really funny because it's the most lightly researched chapter. I don't know if that makes it bad scholarship, but it's the most lightly researched chapter. And I was just like, I'm going to, every now and then, you have to say it how you feel it. You know how you have those emails, not you because you became the president. So this is happening to other people, but everybody else. You get those emails. You say, I might get fired for this. But I'm just going to say it how I feel it. There are portions in that chapter where I was just speaking it how I felt it, and so those are things that I could say. I can give you little nuggets from every chapter, but those would be the ones that come to my mind off the top of my head.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for that great question. I have another question. I think it said, this is from Elizabeth. She says, based on the knowledge gleaned from your writing of this book, what are the steps that the Black church members can take to heal our country of its division?
I'm not sure it's our job. Now, that might seem a little bit callous. I think that what we can do is prepare our hearts. No, I shouldn't say that. What I'm saying is the victims, and I'm not speaking about just a victim mentality. I'm speaking about historical facts here. The victims should not always have to be the advocates. And the truth of the matter is that, and this speaks to, this is in cases of abuse and mistreatment. The like women who've been abused shouldn't have to be the only ones who are fighting to like get the laws changed and to put protections in place. It's responsibility of the whole community. And so it's not the Black church's responsibility alone to heal America. It's the job of the entire body of Christ. What I would say is one of the hard things to do is to keep that heart open to the possibility of change and cooperation. And so I don't know if we have the numbers or the political power to heal America. But I think that we can come alongside people who, and to be honest, like as a Christian, America is never the goal. I mean, I think that like we really have to think about how can we bear witness to the kingdom. And what I think we should be willing to do is to say, how can we as Black Christians join with other Christians of like minds to get about the work of representing a king and a kingdom? And we will heal America along the way, but America is never the goal. America is just a place within which we go about our work. So that's what I would say. I would say that we really have to keep our heart open to the possibility of cooperation, and that we have to keep in mind that like our primary goal is to be witnesses to the king. And I say that as someone who like, I'm happy that I was born here. This is the land of my ancestors. Where else would I be besides here? So it's not about hating America. It's about saying America has its place in my affections, and that place in my affections is beneath the person of Jesus and his church.
Okay. All right. You talked a little bit about this just a few minutes ago about Black anger, and you have a session that's on Black anger. Can you talk a little bit about what people can expect from that session, both from your Black audience, your Black viewers, but also from your non-Black? So what can they expect from that course, and then what do you hope that they take away?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard when people ask you to like shrink down a long and complicated argument into like 2 minutes and then say, look at the longer part, because some of y'all only gonna listen to this. So sign up for the course, read the book. But let me say the following. What I wanted to do was, first of all, like I said, tell the truth. And so the first part of the book and the video, talks about what I call the litany of suffering, where like there's a narrative that informs the Black experience of America that goes from the slave ship up through Jim Crow and up through the present. And unless people know, and this is, if I want to say this to like many of my white Christian brothers and sisters, what I'll say is that there's never going to be community with Black people until the full weight of what happened to us and its ongoing implications is owned.
Yes.
I mean, when I say owned, it's not owned till let's get past it. Like owned in its ramifications. And so once we recognize that we're looking at this problem, then we can begin to talk about a solution. One of the things that happens is we're not looking at the same thing. And so the first thing that I would say to people is what I try to get people to do in the video and in the book itself. Let's look at the thing itself. And everybody who knows anything about trauma recognizes that trauma doesn't just go away. Like as a country, we're still dealing with the aftermath of what happened with 9/11. We never forget, right? And so there's these things that happen that change us. And the traumas that have happened to Black people in America have compounded. And we live with them. And what I wanted to show people theologically, though, is that when you turn to the Bible, you see in the Bible people who have also been traumatized and who have those traumas recorded in biblical text.
Yes.
The Bible records the things that happened to Israel and to Israel in particular. And those stories are in the Bible. So they're read over and over and over and over and over and over again. Why? So we never forget what happened to them. It's a part of the collective memory. God never says, get over exile. No, you remember it. And to be honest, you remember how you got there, so you avoid it again. And so one of the things I tried to get to there then was understanding all of the ways in which the Bible records trauma for the sake of memory. And it includes the unfiltered feelings of the traumatized. One of the things that I talk about is Psalm 137, or even the Psalms of Vengeance in general, where there's these things that are said that just make us like super uncomfortable. And And we kind of read, like, how can we have something like that in the Bible? And I got to give credit to Willie Jennings, because he makes some of this point in his book, The Christian Imagination. He speaks about one of these images of the slave auction that was going on somewhere in South America, I forget where. And he talks about how the person who's chronicling it is evoking the suffering servant imagery to talk about the slaves who are being mistreated, even though he's kind of supporting the colonial enterprise. And what I wanted to say is, well, what kind of psalms does a Black woman who's had her children taken from her write? Like, what kind of cries does she offer to God? And so what we see in the Bible then is trauma literature. And so we can't just dismiss it, because we can't dismiss our own feelings. And so what I try to say to people is, tell God what's going on. And then I can't give you the rest of it, so I got to cut past large parts of it. But I'll say, like, at least the beginning of the turn. They got to listen to they got to read the book and look at the video for the rest.
Yes.
The beginning of the turn is, and the point is, the miracle of the Bible is not that it includes the trauma literature, or that it calls for God to take vengeance upon our enemies. That stuff is exactly what we would expect. That's like, we don't need to be inspired to write trauma literature. But the miracle of the Bible, and this is just like crazy to think about, he said in that same book, I'm talking about the Old Testament before you get to the New Testament, it's in the New Testament too, that the traumatized can have in their text a vision for the salvation of Gentiles. The miracle of the Bible is it sees the possibility of community on the other side of trauma. And it does that without ever losing track of justice. And so the Bible tosses these realities into the mix of the human imagination. We have been mistreated. God needs to judge that mistreatment.
Yes.
But there's a possibility on the other side of it, that even our former enemies might become friends, that the swords might be beaten into plowshares. How can you write that?
Yes.
But God. And so I want to say that in my more like edgy moments, that the vision for the restoration of Israel and the inclusion of the Gentiles is evidence of the inspiration of the scriptures, of God's spirit at work in the traumatized people. Because let me tell you something, I wouldn't have written that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is like free information too.
Yep. No.
It's also why in the book I keep talking about all of these places where I became a Christian, and Black Christians, some of us, those of us who found Jesus, did not do so merely because we saw in the Bible a God who told us things that we already knew. We said, I can get on your team on these terms. Yes, they are part of us that saw in ourselves in these texts. But there's also a part of us that were challenged.
Yes.
For a vision beyond what I already knew. I don't need a God who just on my side and who agrees with my social, cultural, and political opinions. I need a God who redirects me. And so there was one other part. This isn't the question, but I don't got to answer it. Look, I can answer what I want.
You can answer whatever you want.
Part of the things that I want to get at in this book is the Bible doesn't just comfort Black people. It shapes our imagination and our way of being in the world. The Bible speaks back. And it speaks back and it changes us. And so what I tried to get at in that section of the book is the ability for the Bible to expand our horizons beyond what we see. And I want to say that without losing track of all the other stuff that I said before. Now, there's more stuff about that, but you got to buy the book and then
you got to take the course.
Take the course. I feel like I'm doing a commercial. I don't care if y'all. I mean, I guess I gotta care. I care if you sign up or seminary now is going to yell at me. You don't write books. Sorry, just so people should know. Like, you don't write books so people will like buy them. You write books because you want to help people. And so in the best moment when you say, I hope you buy the book, really what I want to say is I hope that you're blessed by the content. And that I say something of use to you in your walk with Jesus.
Absolutely. Well, I do have a couple others, and these two are kind of they're connected in a way. Vivian and then Oscar both. They said It says, based on the feedback that you received, is there something you would change or present differently? And they said they loved the book. It says, but it was surprised by the criticism on it. But then there's also is like how one is how has the black church dealt with how has the black church dealt with the book, and has
Um,
there been some resistance to some of the sectors that exist?
there is one thing that there's two things that I mean, not a lot that I would do. Sounds arrogant, but it's not a lot that I would do differently
Mhm,
because some of the criticisms that I received, I wouldn't like. I grew as a result of them, so I didn't. You can't
mhm,
know what you don't know.
yeah,
One thing that I would have done, but I didn't feel competent to do, um, and I don't even know how to describe it. I
mhm,
would have had a chapter on Black women in
mhm,
some form of fashion, or the testimony of
yes,
Black women in the church.
mhm,
I knew it at the time,
mhm,
and just the way that Black women have been mistreated inside and outside of the church. I knew it at the time, but I just didn't feel like I was. I felt like I wasn't ready to write that chapter.
mhm.
But like if there
Book
was a
two.
chapter, yeah, if there was a chapter that was in the book, it would have been that. There's a small nuance in the way that I categorize uh Black Christians there that I would say a little bit differently. This is a little bit in the weeds. I
Mhm,
talked about I think I might have used the language of pietism or holiness, and I would have made like some further nuances. I think about three streams of the Black Christian tradition. I think I would have added a fourth stream. Now, as far as the criticism, I mean, people stay in their feelings. I mean, so in some sense, it's like it's it's a little bit surprising because I really this is gonna sound see, Vivian, you're gonna make me get emails. In some ways, I was surprised by how like poorly argued the criticisms were. I
mhm,
thought that I would get some people who really had some game who would like really criticize the actual content, but a lot of times it was ideological culture war stuff that didn't have a serious intellectual engagement with the work. It's like y'all are not serious. And so I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't like, like real substantial critique that made me like rethink some of the things. So for example, one like a consistent misinterpretation is how this thing called standpoint epistemology, which I'm accused of consistently, which like I have like refuted in the book and refuted 1,000 times afterwards. And so the fact that like people don't understand, I mean, people seem to not get that point,
mhm,
um, is a little bit disappointing. When I talk about you talk about the Black church's perception of it, there is no one part. One of the things I tried to say is there is no one Black church. The Black church is just like any other manifestation of Christianity. It's multiform. There's different strands of it, and I think that it's been received well. Um, in particular, what I really wanted to do was capture an ethos that isn't often in print. And that's what I want to call the great center of the Black Christian tradition that
mhm,
has historically had a strong love for the scriptures and a strong public advocacy for justice, and seeing those things as working in cooperation in the sense of being much more positive as it relates to the worthiness of the scriptures. I'm not saying it's unique in that. I'm not saying anything negative about other scholars. What I'm saying is that like I really wanted to articulate that particular strand of the Black church tradition. And what's been really, really encouraging to me was Black pastors who said, "Thank you for this." And so I've had an overwhelmingly positive experience from Black church pastors. And even some of my more progressive brothers and sisters have been able to see some positive things in it. Um, but yeah, it's been tricky. I mean, you shouldn't. One of the things that I tried to do when I wrote the book, and you never know, but I like to talk about planting a flag. And what I mean by this, you ever been somewhere, Jeremy, and you have like an opinion and you're not sure if everybody agrees? You kind of like turkey overrated, and you say, and you're like, oh no, and everybody go, yeah, turkey is overrated, and you got a little community, and then sometimes you're wrong. So I was like, you know what? Let's put sugar on grits, and next thing you know, the whole internet turns on me. It's okay, can't say that. And so when I wrote the book, I was like, I experienced Black Christianity in this way. Does anybody else have this experience? And the fact that so many black and brown people said, yes, I understand it, then that was an encouragement. I will say one thing, and this is like, here's some like free smoke for you, Tammy, because it's like 7:41.
Okay.
One of the things that I've noticed is that one of the ways the book does get criticized is they try to reposition it to make it something other than what it is. And what I mean is this book makes a claim, a historical and theological claim, to be coming out of the Black Christian tradition, the Black church tradition in particular. And I have no problem with my evangelical brothers and sisters, but it's not a book about evangelicalism. And so when someone tries to make it a book about evangelicalism or call it Black evangelicalism, then that is not what the book is. And it's a subtle way of trying to associate this form of Christianity with a group of people who are currently out of favor as a way of dismissing those concerns. And what I want to say, no. Like, if words have meaning and things exist in history, then I grew up in a historically Black church. It was representative of an entire strand of the Black Christian tradition. Here are all the receipts in chapter 1 and then in the appendix. This is where I come from. This is what I'm about. There's a whole bunch of us. Treat us with respect and don't just caricature us in order to pursue your own theological and cultural ends.
Okay. Well, I have another question. I think the name is Renicia. She says, based on your book, what insights would you give Black American Christians who do not have a spiritual connection to the Black church yet, and are navigating majority culture evangelical spaces?
Man, it's
It's a
funny
big
because
question.
yeah, what insight would you give? I mean,
Yes.
I would say like one of the things that's like really weird in Christianity, and maybe this will help the reader, is like people feel very, very comfortable. I'm not speaking about the reader, but this might help her get into. I think it was Christine. Was that correct? I thought
No,
a
it was
woman.
Renicia, I think it's called.
Renicia. Oh, I think I would say her. So I just make sure
Yes.
I'm identifying the person correctly.
Okay.
Like we will understand. So you know what? I need to appreciate what's going on in the German theological tradition. Let me go read some Barth and some whatever. And we say, you know what? I love English spirituality. Let me read and experience it and go over to England and walk around cathedrals or whatever. And so we understand that tradition is accessible to us. We can read about it. We can visit. We can go. We can learn. We can expand our understanding of what it means to be a Christian by digging into it. You should go to the global South. You should visit Israel. And so, but we treat the Black Christian tradition like they don't have anything to teach us. And when someone says, here's a spirituality coming out of a particular group of people, there's a suspicion like, well, hold on. And so one of the things that I would say to her is to read the book. And the other thing that I would say to her is like, you got to be an archaeologist if you want to do care about the Black spirituality, our tradition in particular, because it's really in the sermons. It's in the music. It's in the spirituals and the blues. And what you really got to do is find yourself in those spaces. You got to go into an actual Black church. Find you like some of the Black pastors from like the 80s and the 90s and listen to some of their sermons. When I was a kid, I grew up listening to, here's some more receipts for y'all. I grew up listening to like Martin Luther King's sermon and his daddy King and my goodness, C.L. Franklin. I'm like, my grandparents would have the actual tapes. I don't listen to them. So actually, I grew up around like these old school Black preachers who had tape ministries or radio ministries, and you would just listen to those sermons. And so part of those things are still available. So I'm saying like go and be an archivist. It's almost like, in a sense, the early eras of Christianity, where there's all of these primary source material. You just got to dive in. So find 3 or 4 pastors. Maybe choose a pastor from the 60s, a pastor from the 70s, a pastor from the 80s, a pastor from the 90s, and just listen to some of their sermons and get a feel from it. I mean, one of the reasons I became a writer is because I couldn't preach like that. I have high standards. And those brothers and sisters would be preaching one minute and singing the next, and exit. It was such a beautiful, melodic, complex, wonderful spirituality that I would say the only way to do it is to like immerse yourself in it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think as you were talking, I was thinking about the Martin Luther King passage that you had in your book where you talked about where he talked about the Negro is only free when he reaches down into the inner depths of his own being. I going, oh,
Yeah.
yes, it's like reaching down and really understanding who we
He
are
said,
and asserting
he said, you got,
ourselves.
he said you got to write your own Emancipation Proclamation in your. I mean, like this brother.
Hmm.
There is this phrase that he used called having a sense of somebodyness,
Hmm.
and I was just like that captured it because he lived in a time where black people were told that we were nobody,
Hmm.
and he said you need to develop this real genuine sense that you are a child of God, and that your worth and dignity is not up for debate, and this is a somebodyness
Hmm.
as a as and this one as a gift given to you by God. And so when you look down into yourself, you're not looking deep into yourself to find like something that you have to discover, or that you have to create for yourself. But
Hmm.
when you look inside, you hear God's voice saying to you, you are a son or a daughter because you're made in his image.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely. I was like, this is the question. I think I really would love to. I want to hear your answer to. And this is from someone who's listening from seminary now. I said, if you think about the next generation, what would you say to someone who is ready to walk away from their faith, or the church, no matter what their ethnicity? What word of hope would you give them so that in it?
Yeah, I think that normally people, I mean, lots of things lead to people walking away from their faith.
Mm,
And it's complex to try to pastor all of those different things. And I want to say, like, I know that a lot of these trite answers rarely satisfy people, but I can just tell you, like, why I stayed. Um, and it was because I believe that certain things are true. And what I mean by that is I looked into the evidence for the resurrection, and I believe that Jesus Christ defeated death. And my trauma, as real as it was, can't unresurrect Jesus.
mhm,
And this is not to be flippant or to or to speak lightly about the things that we go through or the disappointments that we might experience. But I found that when I reasoned from present Christians or from my trauma to the past, I got myself in trouble. But when I thought from the resurrection forward, in other words, sometimes trauma can cause us to relitigate our past, and I've talked about this a lot. So, say for example, you and your loved one, before y'all got married, y'all dating, and and he say something reckless or something, and next thing you know, you never cared about me, and you like what happens is you go back and you undo all the things you said that happened before, and you say none of it was true,
mhm,
but that's not what actually happened.
mhm,
And so what I'm saying is sometimes we see something that really disappoints us. And then we go back and say, you know what? When I said I trusted Jesus back in the day, I didn't really mean it. And what I want to say is you did.
mhm,
That when you heard the gospel and something inside you said that it is true, that was real and that was genuine.
mhm,
And then if it's white supremacy, if it's church hypocrisy, if it's mistreatment, those things do not have the power to unresurrect Jesus. Our great enemy was sin and death. Those two things have been defeated. If those two
yes.
things are defeated, nothing can put him back in the tomb. What can happen though is we can be overcome by despair. And our despair can lead to our doubting. Our doubting can lead to relitigating our past. And then that's one of the ways in which our faith unravels. And so what I want to encourage people to do, and I'm sorry to say this, that like theology matters. And the things that we believe about the resurrection and the person of Christ actually matters. And reasoning from Jesus towards hope. And even if it's a weary one of the things that, sorry, this is like, welcome to therapy. One of the other things that I think that we, and I don't want to be flippant. I'm talking about myself. So this is not an attack on anyone. We tend to think about like seasons as being like, I had a bad month, I had a bad week, but sometimes you have bad years. Yes. Sometimes it's hard for a decade. And so we sometimes are in the middle of something and we just want it to be over. And unfortunately, we don't control the timing. And sometimes the victory is literally when you die and you meet your creator. And that's the reason why these beliefs about the resurrection and these other things aren't the games of children. It's the game for adults.
Yes.
And when I say adults, I mean, this is like, you're going to die. And when you die, God will either call you to himself or he will not. And if he will, then you can walk with him to the end.
Well, Tom, thanks so much for that question. I do have a question from Robert. He says he wanted to let you know he subscribed to the Seminary Now course. So he's looking forward to that. So, but then also he said, isn't the real tragedy and heresy of the white church that it views itself as normative? So is that the real tragedy of the church?
I mean, I really, it's funny. It's like there is, and listen, all bills come due. This is one of the things I say to my kids all of the time. Eventually, if you do dirt, you know you're gonna have to pay the piper. And we're in a season of reckoning, where the sins of the past and the present are kind of being manifested right now. And there are people who are called to pull those receipts. And I don't want to short circuit that process. But I do want to say Black Christians have more to say than white Christians that messed up. And so I could point out 1,000 different things that I find annoying about, the failures of the church. But like the Black church, we have our own failures too. And we have to, I guess I use this analogy. This is becoming more and more dated, but I'll drop it again. So Jay-Z cheated. I'm assuming Jay-Z, I'm not in his business, but I'm assuming Jay-Z cheated on Beyonce. That's why she wrote Lemonade. And the question is, like, what happened after Lemonade? What was going to happen? And so Jay-Z wrote 444, which was an apology record, right? And so I feel like what's happening right now is that a lot of Black Christians are still, which is fine. I'm not telling people they can't do it. We writing the Lemonade album. We writing the breakup album. We think if we keep writing the breakup album, eventually we're going to get the apology that we wanted. And the relationship might continue. So it's actually, we're speaking that about hurt because we want to hear people say, I'm sorry.
Right.
And that's a real, genuine Christian concern. But some folks ain't about to apologize. And if they're not about to apologize, at a certain point, we have to build with the people who do.
Yes.
And so my concern, I feel like we all know what time it is at this point. I'm not telling people how they can process. I'm talking about where I am in my own emotional state. My concern I guess what I want to say is this. I have white Christian friends who are doing the best that they can to love Jesus and walk with him and to be advocates for justice. And my vocation is to encourage them rather than to yell at the, people who aren't on that. And I have Asian brothers and sisters who are about the same thing, and Latino brothers and sisters who are about the same thing. And what I want is all of us together. If we get all of those groups of people together, I think we have the majority of the church. And that is where my emotional energy and my concern is. And so you're right. It is the case that like white Christians some white Christians, you never want to make a totalizing claim, can treat themselves as normal, and us as like optional. It's almost like the fact that the ethnic food item stuff in the grocery store is where the ethnic, like as if you know what I mean. So but
Yes.
we have that problem in theology too.
Mhm.
As if their stuff isn't theologically socially located. But we know all of that. What I'm saying is like we know it at this point.
Mhm.
And it's on the internet and it's in the books. Now what we gonna do? And
Right.
so one of the things that made Reading While Black a little bit different, and I think it's why some people could deal with it a little bit more.
Mhm.
This wasn't the intent, but it's just how the book was written.
Mhm.
I wasn't trying to convince anybody of anything. It presumed everything was messed up, and it says, "Well, what do you do in light of that?"
Right.
And just a lot of books that kind of like there was a lot of books that I thought that I consider in my brain my book a part two of. Okay, you read all of this other stuff, you realize that everything is messed up, the church is
Mhm.
broken, people are hypocritical. Well, now what do you do?
Mhm.
Well, here's how you pick up. So I've always felt like my vocation in ministry, the book, the video series, everything else, is really looking towards what comes next.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, one question that came up was they said they understand that you're writing a commentary. Is this true? Yes.
Oh, the commentary that people will see most is it's the New Testament in color, and it's
Okay.
actually with IVP.
Mhm.
Lord, hopefully we'll get it done soon. But what we did is we gathered together, and actually, if you want to talk about the companion pieces to Reading While Black, this is actually the companion piece. Everything
Right.
happened in between, but they're supposed to come out much closer together. But what I did is I gathered together white Christians, Asian Christians, Latino Christians, there's First Nations people. We got as many basically American ethnic
Mhm.
minorities to put together a commentary, a single volume commentary of the New Testament called the New Testament in color. And the Reading While Black was an attempt to say, here's the unique contributions of the Black church to the wider Christian experience. New Testament in color was an attempt to say, here's what happens when the entire body of Christ reads the Bible together. And
Beautiful.
so that's coming out at some point. We hope, we hope,
Soon.
we hope
Soon
soon.
indeed.
We hope soon. Yes, there we go. We hope soon. But
All right.
one of the things that you figure, like a pandemic broke out, and it's one thing. I had one calendar when I'm
You are
writing the
not
book.
using that as an excuse.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I apologize. But the other thing is, like when you write something, you can just write it. But when you're writing with other people, it's like 30 authors across the United States who all have
Mhm.
their own lives and those things. So that's what's coming next as far as the commentary. And I wrote
Okay.
the entry on Ephesians
Okay. All
in
right.
there. So that'll be the next commentary you see from me.
All right. So it will be illustrative of of what you've talked
Yeah.
about with Reading While Black. So that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Great. So I think it's like we have I know we have it's oh my goodness, it's already 8 o'clock. Good gravy. It's
Okay.
been wonderful though. How about I throw you like one more question and we'll
Okay.
it's like how about the question on? It's like although the course is for, it's like it's called Reading While Black. It's like
Yeah.
is it really it's like is it truly for it's not just for black people that are reading a book. It's watching the course. It's like
Yeah.
what's important for for everyone that's reading it or everyone that's participating in the course. Really, what do you want to come out of it?
Yeah, I see it.
How do you want us to really walk away from your course? What is it that you hope we get?
Um, so someone I was reading. I'm a little going back between the question and the one that popped up about reading while
Right.
Christian. I'm going to answer
Hmm.
that question.
Okay.
Let me answer that question because
Okay.
it's really interesting. Like something doesn't have to be to you for you to benefit from it. So
Right.
you think of Jane Austen, she wasn't thinking about us when she wrote that book. She was thinking about like her people and her context. But we can,
Yeah.
from outsiders in that culture, read it and take
Absolutely.
something from it. This is what I want people to understand. There's a thing called Anglophiles. But they basically say, I just love British culture, Down Abbey, all of it. I
Hmm.
can't get enough of it. And there's a book called How the Irish Saved Christianity, right? Or the Celts. And so we have
Right.
all of these times where we can read about other cultures and appreciate them. About this, like Scottish theology. There's a book called Scottish Theology. And so we have these other cultures that we're not a part of, whose issues aren't directly concerning us, who we can nonetheless learn from. I'll give you all like something to think about. The next time you go and you get a commentary written anytime before 2015, just read it, especially one of the pastoral commentaries, and then read the applications of the pastoral applications, and ask yourself this: what color people does this person have in mind? And most of the time, the applications I have in mind like a white suburban church, because that's where the people who wrote the commentaries came from. But nonetheless, Black people buy those books, read it, and say, you know what? This isn't from me. We remix it and we put it in our context. Because ultimately, we are talking about God. And so my book is open to everyone, just like it's open to like any other book is open to everyone. But it doesn't have to be to you to learn from you, for you to learn from it. And I wrote the book like that on purpose. I remember when I used to sit in seminary, and they would always make these Monty Python references and Seinfeld. And I wasn't watching Monty Python. I was watching Cosby Show. Sorry, this is before Cosby went sideways. But like the Cosby Show, A Different World. I went the entirety of my theological education and didn't hear one different world analogy, right? One living color analogy, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying is I had to learn how to do cultural translation. And so what the other person asked about normativity, one of the ways that the book is disoriented, people say, well, can I read it if I'm not Black? I would say, of course you can. But I don't have to make it to you for you to benefit from it. So I wrote it to a community, but because it's about Jesus, it's open to the world. And so what I want people to understand then, and let's get to what they can take away from it, that Black Christianity, precisely because it is Black, has the opportunity to be universal. It is a contribution to a conversation about the things of God. And it can open up ways of understanding God that are not necessarily created by Black people. There are things that are in the text and in Christianity. It's just like the same music played in a different key. Sometimes that different key helps you appreciate nuances that you might have missed.
Yep. Exactly. Well, do you have any final words for us as we walk away from this? I know, Linda did ask a question. She says, what kind of research did you do? And how long did you spend researching? So that's a good question.
Okay.
You spent your whole life.
I wish there is like, you're either from it or you're not from it.
Right.
So part of it was there was a lot of confidence. Like I know what I'm talking about. I'm from a family of Black pastors. I mean, there's some songs there's some songs we sung in my church that ain't on YouTube. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't want to say that's like from the field to the church. That's how it was.
That's right.
And so, like part of it was like there was a real sense of not arrogance but confidence that I knew what I was talking about. And so when people sometimes criticize, like, I was my Black self in Huntsville, Alabama. How you gonna tell me what was happening? So, and part of it was there. So the research of it, it took me about 2 years to like write the book from beginning to end. So part of it, the exegesis was just a lifetime of being in the Bible. So part of it was just experience being in the culture. And another part of it was just my biblical training. I got a question for you. Can I ask you a question, Karen?
Sure.
How does it feel to be like a woman of color ahead of like one of the bigger publisher companies in evangelicalism? You're like a trendsetter. Like, how do you feel? We need to have like leading publishers. Wow. You need to write a book.
Well,
So
I feel incredibly blessed. It was a process of a lot of prayer and discernment in order to get here, but I feel incredibly blessed. IVP has a long history in justice, and I have felt so privileged to be a part of it for the time that I've been here. I've been here 3.5 years. So just to take this next step, I am so looking forward to what the future holds. God has been very good. So it is a blessing.
It's a woman of color leading this, so y'all need to pull up and support her. Y'all need to act right now. Buy the book.
That's right.
All right. You don't get it too often. Listen, you're not in charge. I can brag about you. This is my video. Support this woman. All right. Sorry.
All right. So it's like we're going to conclude. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you've done with regard to your book. and just the conversation that you've opened up, which has been so unique and wonderful, and something that's very needed. So I deeply appreciate that. I'm looking forward to many more books from you. It's been exciting. I am thrilled at the opportunity to have interviewed you in this way. It's
Oh,
been
thank
great
you.
to talk to you and meet you. So,
You have a great evening.
you too. Take care. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.